Have you ever come across a place so unsettling that it seems to radiate its own darkness? I began, leaning forward as the fire crackled between us. The new rangers looked at me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. If you ever find a clearing with a single black tree at its center, remember Rule 13. Do not enter. It was a bright summer day, the kind that makes the forest come alive with sounds and colors. I was on a routine patrol, enjoying the warmth of the sun filtering through the canopy and the chorus of birds singing above. Everything seemed normal, peaceful even, until I stumbled upon it. The path I was following opened up into a clearing. At its center stood a tree unlike any I had ever seen. A towering, twisted black tree, its bark dark as midnight. The vibrant greenery of the forest seemed to stop abruptly at the edge of the clearing, as if the other trees were afraid to get too close. The contrast was jarring. The tree a stark, ominous presence in an otherwise serene landscape. As I stood at the edge of the clearing, an unnatural silence fell over the forest. The birds stopped singing, and the rustling of leaves ceased, leaving an eerie stillness that set my nerves on edge. I felt an almost magnetic pull towards the tree, an urge to step into the clearing and examine it more closely. But there was something profoundly wrong about the place, a sense of malevolence that sent chills down my spine. I took a cautious step forward, my curiosity battling with the growing sense of dread. The air around the clearing felt colder. The shadows cast by the tree's twisted branches seemed to stretch and shift unnaturally. As I inched closer, the oppressive silence grew heavier, and the light seemed to dim, as if the tree was absorbing it. I stopped at the edge of the clearing, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. The black tree loomed before me, its bark glistening in the faint light. The longer I looked at it, the more I felt as though the tree was watching me, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal hands. I remembered the warnings from the veteran rangers, the stories they told of those who had entered such clearings and never returned. A wave of nausea hit me as I stood there, and I felt an almost physical pressure pushing against my chest. The tree seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its presence overwhelming. I took a step back, then another, fighting the urge to move closer. As I retreated, I could have sworn I saw the tree's branches twitch, as if trying to reach out and grab me. I turned and walked away quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. The oppressive feeling began to lift as I moved further from the clearing, but the sense of being watched lingered. I glanced back once, and the clearing looked just as it had when I first saw it, peaceful and serene, except for that malevolent black tree standing at its center. Back at the ranger station, I couldn't shake the experience. That night, my sleep was plagued by nightmares of the black tree and the souls it had claimed. In my dreams, I saw faces twisted in agony, their eyes pleading for release, trapped forever within the tree's dark embrace. "Remember Rule 13, I said firmly, meeting each ranger's gaze. If you ever find a clearing with a single black tree at its center, do not enter. The tree is a trap, designed to consume your soul and keep it trapped for eternity." The fire burned steadily, casting long shadows that flickered and danced around us. The new rangers sat in tense silence, the weight of my story about the black tree heavy in the air. It was time for them to hear about Emma, a hiker whose curiosity led her to a fate sealed by the darkness of whispering pines. Let me tell you about Emma. Emma was an adventurous soul, always eager to explore every hidden corner of the forest. She was a nature enthusiast, always with her camera ready to capture the beauty of the wilderness. It was a warm autumn afternoon when Emma set out on her solo hike. The forest was a symphony of colors, the leaves turning shades of red, orange, and gold. She had been to Whispering Pines many times before, but this time she decided to venture off the beaten path, eager to discover new sights. Emma wandered deeper into the forest, her camera clicking as she captured the vibrant scenery. As she moved further from the familiar trails, she stumbled upon a clearing she had never seen before. At its center stood a single black tree, its twisted branches stark against the bright autumn foliage. The tree's appearance was both mesmerizing and unsettling. Its bark was dark as midnight, and the air around it seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. Emma's curiosity was piqued. She approached the clearing, drawn by the tree's eerie beauty and the stark contrast it presented against the colorful backdrop of the forest. As Emma stepped into the clearing, the atmosphere changed. The air grew colder, and the vibrant sounds of the forest faded into an oppressive silence. She paused, a sense of unease creeping over her, but her curiosity pushed her forward. She wanted to capture the tree's uniqueness, to understand why it stood alone in this secluded spot. Emma moved closer, her camera clicking away. She noticed that the light seemed to dim as she approached the tree, shadows lengthening and deepening. The tree's bark was smooth and cold to the touch, sending a shiver down her spine. She felt an almost magnetic pull towards the tree, a compulsion to understand its mystery. As she stood at the base of the tree, shadows began to move and shift around her. She tried to ignore the growing sense of dread, focusing on her camera. She reached out to touch the tree again, and this time, she felt something more. A subtle, almost imperceptible movement, like the tree was alive and responding to her presence. Suddenly, shadowy tendrils emerged from the tree, wrapping around her wrist. Emma gasped, trying to pull away, but the tendrils tightened their grip, cold and unyielding. Panic set in as she struggled, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. The shadows seemed to come alive, enveloping her in a suffocating darkness. Emma's screams echoed through the clearing, a chilling sound that quickly faded into the oppressive silence. The tree's tendrils pulled her closer, consuming her entirely. The last thing she saw was the twisted, malevolent shape of the tree's branches reaching out, as if to embrace her in a final, deadly grip. When Emma failed to return from her hike, a search party was organized. We combed the forest, following her usual paths and venturing into less traveled areas. Days passed with no sign of her. It wasn't until we reached the edge of the unfamiliar clearing that we found her belongings. Her backpack, her camera, and a few scattered personal items, lying abandoned at the edge. There was no trace of Emma herself. The black tree stood silently in the center of the clearing, its presence more menacing than ever. We realized with a heavy heart that she had become another victim of the tree's malevolent power, her soul trapped within its dark embrace. Emma's curiosity led her to a fate sealed by the darkness of whispering pines. The fire crackled softly, the night growing darker around us. The fire had burned low, casting long, eerie shadows across the circle of rangers. The new recruits sat in a tense silence, the weight of Emma's tragic fate hanging heavily in the air. It was time to delve deeper into the history behind the Black Tree and the importance of Rule 13. After Emma disappeared, the atmosphere among us rangers changed. We felt the loss keenly, and the forest seemed darker, more foreboding. It became clear that the warnings were not just superstitions, but essential rules for our survival. We decided to investigate further, to understand the true nature of the Black Tree. We delved into the history of Whispering Pines, uncovering old records and legends that hinted at the tree's origins. Whispering Pines is an ancient forest, and its secrets run deep. Centuries ago, before the forest was a protected area, it was the site of rituals and sacrifices meant to appease dark spirits. The villagers who lived near the forest believed that these spirits could be controlled, that they could grant power and protection. They performed unspeakable acts, sacrificing animals and even children to these malevolent entities. One of these entities, the most malevolent of them all, became bound to the forest. It thrived on the fear and despair of its victims, using the Black Tree as a conduit for its dark power. The tree's roots run deep, feeding on the souls of those who enter its clearing. It traps them for eternity, their despair and fear nourishing the entity. We found old journals and records from those who had encountered the tree before. Their descriptions were eerily similar. An overwhelming sense of dread, shadows that seemed to move on their own, and an almost irresistible pull towards the tree. Those who ignored the warnings never returned. their fates sealed by the tree's malevolent power. After Emma vanished, we all became more vigilant. We knew we had to respect the rules and stay alert. The forest is filled with many dangers, but none as insidious as the black tree and the entity that uses it to trap souls. We documented everything we could find about the black tree. We spread the word, made sure every ranger understood the importance of Rule 13, and we made a promise to ourselves and to those who had vanished, to always heed the warnings and protect one another from the forest's malevolence. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows as the new rangers sat in quiet reflection. The night was filled with the whispers of the wind and the rustling of leaves, a constant reminder of the forest's presence. Stay safe. And remember, if you ever find a clearing with a single black tree at its center, do not enter. The tree is a trap designed to consume your soul and keep it trapped for eternity.